Hello everyone, I'm Varun Rajan, and I'm going to talk about an exciting new service called as the OCI Bastion Service. I want to take a few minutes to discuss why this will be extremely valuable to use as part of your architecture. The views expressed in the following slides and demo are that of my own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Oracle. The purpose is to educate you on the new feature called as the OCI Bastion Service. So I'll start off with a quick introduction to the OCI Bastion service. We'll look at the different use cases that are supported and follow that up with a demonstration of the OCI Bastion service. The OCI Bastion service is a new fully managed service providing shell and ephemeral access to the private resources in OCI. The OCI Bastion improves security posture by providing an additional layer of defense against external threats. In the past, customers had to resort to complex network architectures of public and private subnets, jump hosts, or rely on third-party services to access the private resources in OCI. Those methodologies could be costly, difficult to maintain, challenging for compliance, and hard for administrators to maintain a strong security posture. The OCI Bastion eliminates the need for deploying complex networking or jump hosts to easily build SSH access to private resources. The service makes security easier for customers to implement and maintain, which is at the core of Oracle's approach to cloud security. The cost, deployment, and management of using a jump host is a huge pain point, which can lead to a weaker security posture. The OCI Bastion service removes the public and private VCN hassle for access to a jump host. No public IP is needed, which results in no surface attack area or zero-day vulnerabilities that you see with a dedicated jump host. Customers also eliminate shared credentials, broad access limits, and other bad habits of using jump hosts. The OCI Bastion integrates with OCI Identity and Access Management services and allows the organization to control who can access a bastion or a session and what they can do with those resources. In addition, the health, capacity, and performance of OCI Bastion can be monitored using metrics, alarms, notifications, and event services. The OCI Bastion is also integrated with our audit services, so you can track how or when these Bastion services or sessions are created or used. In a typical enterprise architecture or a three-tier application, you have your app servers and database servers in a private subnet. And you would use a jump host to access these private endpoints. With the new Bastion service, you do not have to manage a jump host, and you could use this managed Bastion service to access your private endpoints. The Bastion service is built on top of OpenSSH. It can be used to integrate with a number of different endpoints. These could be your compute instances running using Linux or Windows operating systems. These could be database services, platform as a service, database services, Oracle database services, or MySQL database services as well. There are a couple of different ways that you can set up the Bastion and session to connect to your endpoint. You could either use the managed SSH session option, or you could use the port forwarding session option. With the managed SSH session option, there is something called as a cloud agent that is provisioned along with the compute instance. And this cloud agent is responsible for access via the Bastion service. For instances that do not have the cloud agent, you can use the port forwarding session type. For example, you have Oracle database services or MySQL database services that do not have the cloud agent. You can use the port forwarding session type to connect to those endpoints. With that, let's quickly look at a demonstration of how to set this up. So I'm in my Oracle Cloud Console here. Before I get to the Bastion and sessions, there are a couple of prerequisites that I want you to be aware of. So first, let's make sure we have our VCN set up. So I have a VCN here with a CIDR block range of 11.0.0.0/16. And this VCN has a couple of different subnets. I have one private subnet for the app tier, and I have another private subnet for the database tier. So looking at the private subnet for the app tier, there's a security list configured, which allows ingress traffic from 11.0.0/16. I have a similar rule configured for the database subnet as well. And that also allows access only from 11.0.0.0/16. So with that in mind, let's look at a couple of other things. I have this compute instance that is running. It's an app server that's been installed on a compute instance. It has a private IP address, and it is deployed on a private subnet. Okay. The cloud agent that I was previously talking about is the cloud agent. Make sure the cloud agent is running for the Bastion access, and this is enabled. Okay. So we have the compute instance running here. I want to also check on the Oracle database, make sure that is available and accessible from our Bastion service as well. So I have this database service here that is also on the private subnet for database. And if I go to the node here, I have a private IP address for this as well. So let me take a note of this IP address for our future access. So with that, let's go to the Bastion service. So you'll find the Bastion service under our identity and security menu. And here you can click on the Bastion service. So I'm going to create a new Bastion service. You can give it a name, any name you want to. So I'm going to call it as demo Bastion service. I'll select the VCN that I want this Bastion service to be deployed on. And this could be any subnet, or it could be another subnet that you want the Bastion service to be created on. And what does it mean by the CIDR block allow list? This is a set of IP addresses from which you can access this Bastion service. For this demonstration, I'm going to say 0.0.0/0. But in a typical enterprise, you would probably have a set of IP addresses from which you want to access this Bastion. And that's the IP addresses, that IP address range that you would set up here. With that, a couple of other things that I want to mention here is that one of the key aspects of this Bastion service is an ephemeral access to the endpoints. And for that reason, you will have a session time limit that you would need to set up while you're provisioning the Bastion service or the session. Okay. With that, I'm going to create the Bastion service here. It's going to take less than a minute to create it. While it is being created, let me go to the Bastion service here. And we have the provision to create sessions here. And once the sessions are created, you can look at the metrics to see how um, the Bastion service is being used and how the sessions are being used as well. Okay. And in this case, this Bastion is accessible from 0.0.0/0, but in your case, you would have something that's more narrower than that. Let's give this a minute to create the, okay. So the Bastion service is now active. And now I'm going to go ahead and create a session. So to create a session, I was talking about the two different options here. Since the compute agent already has the cloud agent that we spoke about, we can use the manage as a session type. Say app session. This is, I'm going to create a session for my app server. The default username is OPC. And by default, what this shows is this shows all the compute instances that are available in that compartment. So I'm going to provide my public key that I want to use. And we spoke about the ephemeral access. By default, it's 180 minutes. And say create session. It's going to maybe take a minute to create the session as well. So while that is happening, let's make sure. Okay, I have my keys here. So let's wait for the session to be created. Okay, so that was quick. We have the session created. I'm going to copy the SSH command. And with this SSH command, I am going to connect to my backend application server. So I paste it here. Wherever it says the private key, I'm going to update the private key that I used while provisioning the instance. Say, in my case, I'm using the same key for both, but you could have different keys here as well. Okay, with that, let's, okay. So as you can see, I am now in the app server with the username OPC. So PWD, and as you can see, that's how you connect to the private endpoint using the Bastion service. Okay. So I'm going to exit out of here. There's another SSH port forwarding that I want to show in this demonstration as well. So the next step is to create another session to connect. This time I want to use the SSH port forwarding session to connect to my backend database. So DB server session. And in this case, I have to provide the IP address of my backend server. So you remember I copied the IP address a short while back. So I'm going to use that IP address here. And similarly, I'm going to use the public key that I want to use while provisioning this session. Okay. Similarly, I have this session time to live as well, defaulted to 180 minutes. So with that, let's create a session to our database server as well. Okay, I might need a couple of Git batch instances to access here. Okay, so what you see here is now the database server session is also running. So I copy this SSH command here. And the first step that I'm going to do is paste it here. And similar to how we did it earlier, we have to update the private key. _RSA. And a local port. This is needed for the port forwarding. What I'm going to do now is to forward the SSH from port 2090 in my local desktop to the remote database server. Okay, so with that, let me go here and SSH, and now I can connect to my database server. Okay, so I have that, and I'm going to say my local host 27.0.0.1-p and use the same port that I've used and -b. Okay, cool. Okay, so as you can see here, I am on the remote database instance using the OPC user, and dbas is the name of the database instance. Okay. With that, that pretty much wraps the demonstration of how to create a database session, how to create how to create a session to your compute instances using the Bastion and session services within the Bastion service. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and thank you for your time.